It started as an ordinary day at the bustling city park, kids playing, families chatting, and two police officers casually patrolling the area. But things took an unexpected turn when the officers stopped a young black girl with a colorful backpack, their playful teasing quickly turning into something more uncomfortable. What they didn't know was this wasn't just any teenager. Behind her calm demeanor and confident gaze, she carried a secret that could change everything. She wasn't just a regular kid, she was the daughter of the US ambassador. As the officer's words and actions drew the attention of passersby, the tension began to build. The girl's composed reaction and the contents of her backpack would leave everyone stunned. What started as an ordinary interaction would soon spiral into a moment of reckoning that none of them could have seen coming. Stay tuned. This story is far from over. The officers, still unaware of who they were dealing with, continued to joke about the girl's oversized backpack. "What do you have in there? The kitchen sink?" One of them laughed. The girl remained calm, her expression unreadable, but her posture was unshaken. A small crowd began to gather nearby, curious about the interaction. What the officers didn't know was that the girl wasn't just calm, she was calculating. She had been raised in the world of diplomacy, trained to navigate tense situations with grace. Her father had always taught her to remain composed, no matter the circumstances. As one officer reached for the backpack, she instinctively pulled it closer, her voice steady as she said, "I'd prefer if you didn't touch that." This only fueled their curiosity. But what was inside that backpack, and why did she seem so protective of it? The air grew heavier with anticipation. The officer ignored her words, his hand hovering near the backpack as if testing her resolve. "Relax, we're just making sure everything's safe," he said with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The girl didn't flinch, but subtly shifted her stance, her calm presence beginning to unsettle the officers in a way they couldn't quite place. Meanwhile, whispers rippled through the small crowd. "Do they know who she is?" One woman murmured, recognizing the girl from a recent news segment about the ambassador's family. Others, unaware of her identity, simply watched with growing unease. Inside the backpack, neatly tucked away, was something far more significant than they could imagine: official documents and a diplomatic pass, items she had been tasked to carry for her father. The girl wasn't just protective of her belongings, she understood the weight of what was at stake. Still, the officers pressed on, their teasing now laced with suspicion. The girl's quiet confidence only added to the tension, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. But what would happen if the truth came out? That answer hung in the air, unanswered, as everyone waited to see what would unfold next. The tension was almost unbearable as one of the officers finally reached for the backpack, ignoring her firm but polite protests. "We're just going to have a quick look," he said, his tone dismissive. The girl didn't step back, but her voice sharpened as she replied, "You don't have the right to do that without my permission." The firmness in her voice caught the officer off guard, but he hesitated only for a moment before unzipping the bag. Before he could fully open it, a voice boomed from behind the crowd. "Stop right there." Heads turned as a sharply dressed man emerged, his commanding presence silencing the growing murmurs. It was one of the ambassador's aides, recognizable by the pin on his lapel. The girl exhaled softly, but her expression remained steady, as if she had been expecting this moment. The aide strode forward with purpose, addressing the officers directly. "Do you know who she is?" he asked, his tone clipped and firm. The officers exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to say. The crowd leaned in closer, eager to see how this would unfold. The officer holding the backpack froze, his hand still resting on the zipper. The girl didn't say a word, but her silence spoke volumes. The moment was electric, the weight of the truth pressing down on everyone. All eyes were on her now, waiting for the revelation that would change everything. The aide's presence was enough to stop the officers from moving any further, but the girl's calmness only heightened the unease in the air. For a moment, it seemed like everything might settle, until the crowd began murmuring again, this time with a different kind of urgency. The officer who had been holding the backpack suddenly looked up, his eyes wide in disbelief. He stepped back, motioning for the other officer to do the same. "What is it?" The girl's voice cut through the silence, but it wasn't directed at the officers, it was aimed at the aide. The aide's face had gone pale, and he glanced at her for the first time with a deep, almost unreadable look in his eyes. The girl's heartbeat quickened, but she kept her composure. "What's wrong?" she repeated. I didn't know they were here," the aide stammered, his voice betraying a crack in his usually smooth demeanor. He glanced around, his eyes darting to a nondescript black SUV parked nearby. The door opened, and two more figures emerged, both in dark suits, carrying the unmistakable air of authority. One of them was a high-ranking government official, the other, someone with even more influence, someone from a world far more dangerous than anyone had expected. The aide's panic was now evident. The girl's jaw tightened as she realized something wasn't right. The situation had spiraled into something far bigger than she could have predicted. The stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just about a misunderstanding with two officers, it was about who was watching, and what they were prepared to do next. The crowd, once curious, now fell into an uneasy silence, sensing the gravity of the situation. The girl's mind raced. Was she really about to find out what had been hidden from her all this time? And how far were they willing to go to protect it? The air was thick with tension as the two figures in dark suits approached. The girl stood her ground, her hands clenched at her sides. The officer holding the backpack took another step back, suddenly unsure of what he had gotten himself into. The older of the two men, his expression unreadable, nodded toward the aide. "Step aside," he said in a voice that left no room for argument. The aide hesitated but obeyed, his shoulders sagging slightly. The man turned his attention to the girl, his gaze sharp. "Miss, I need to confirm your identity," he said, though his tone suggested he already knew. Without hesitation, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black card, her diplomatic identification. The officer's face turned red as he realized his mistake. "Ma'am, I didn't know," he started, but the suited man cut him off with a glare. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask." But just as the crowd began to settle, the girl spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "It's not just about me. It's about how you treat people when you think they're powerless." Her words hit like a punch, and a ripple went through the crowd. The suited man raised a hand, signaling silence. "She's right," he said, surprising everyone, even the girl. "This is a moment to reflect, not to argue." He turned to the officers. "You'll be hearing from us." As the officers tried to quietly slip away, the girl picked up her backpack and looked at the man. "There's something else, isn't there?" she asked. For a brief moment, his stoic expression faltered. "Your father wanted me to tell you. What's in that bag is more important than you know. But it's your choice what to do with it." The girl froze, her mind spinning. She had thought it was just routine documents. But now the weight of the backpack felt different, like it carried more than just papers. She glanced at the man, then back at the crowd. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just about her anymore. The truth, whatever it was, had the power to change more than just this moment. With that, she walked away, leaving everyone behind to wonder what had just happened, and what was still to come. As she walked away, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving the park buzzing with quiet whispers. The officers, now humbled, retreated to their car, their expressions a mix of regret and embarrassment. The aide followed closely behind the girl, his face still tense, but she stopped him with a calm look. "I'll handle it," she said firmly, and for the first time he didn't argue. Later that evening, in the privacy of her room, she finally unzipped the backpack. Inside were not just documents, but a sealed envelope marked classified. Her father's handwriting on a note attached read, "Asterisk, when the time is right, you'll understand why this matters." Asterisk. She held the envelope for a long moment, the weight of the day settling in. While she still didn't know the full story, one thing was clear. Her voice, her strength, and her identity had made an impact, And that was just the beginning.